records, because the current audit is being done by the same group that collects our money and issues the checks. Our audit starts by gathering all the records, so I have asked the current secretary, Barbie Bly, and I sent her a certified letter requesting all meeting minutes from 2019 to the present. In Article 6, Section 5C, it states that the Secretary of the Board shall be the custodian of all corporate records, which includes assessment records, meeting minutes, contracts, and disbursements of funds. Article 3, Section 2 states the Secretary records all resolutions and transactions in board meetings. Currently, the PMP loads the meetings and minutes into the PMP webpage for Stonebridge. And we aren't sure how complete those minutes are because they have changed hands several times. And we don't know, we don't have the timely access to the meeting minutes, so we don't know what transpires in between there. These meeting minutes are the resolutions and transactions that authorize the spending of our money. So we are finding out long after the decision has already been made by the board. We also don't know what goes on in executive session. The board is supposed to come back in an open session and take votes. Do we know that this is happening? How much is done behind closed doors? Then Article 5, Section 2X, the board shall maintain full and accurate books and records showing all receipts, expenses, or disbursements, and to permit examination thereof by members of the association. This is there's very little transparency of how our money is spent, and an audit will help us understand if the money is being spent for the betterment of our community. And there's a lot more to come, so I am going to turn the mic over to Tom.
One of the things when Jim was coming around and collecting signatures, we had a discussion, and in the process he found out that I had more than a passing interest and experience with contracts. So he asked me if I would step up, and so what we've done is, again, sent a letter to the secretary, a certified letter, requesting copies of all contracts. Forgive me if I'm preaching to the choir here, but people just need to understand, verbal contracts, contracts that are written, called like napkin contracts, where you could just, write, those are all perfectly legal contracts. However, if there is an issue, they become very, very hard to enforce. Whereas if you have a formal contract, then it has a well-defined scope of work and the written word rules. If you run into a problem someplace, you go back there, and that's why contracts need to be detailed, and the devil is in the details. Whatever is written there is what's going to rule. So that way it's not open, it's not subject to interpretation. So again, I have asked for copies of all the contracts and told them, we don't care, I don't want to know the vendors' names, I don't want to know the money, because if they could say we're violating privacy laws or something like that. I told them, redact all that information. What I'm looking for is the scope of work. Okay, so that we know what we have contracts for. We want to see those details. That'll be interesting. Standard business practice is to put contracts out for a competitive bid. So I'll really be interested in seeing if that's what actually happened. And the bylaws state that the signatures of the president and the secretary have to be affixed to those contracts. Okay, it's in Article 4, Section 5 of the bylaws. So, and also to let you know that the When I say all contracts, we mean everything, and that includes the contract for property management. Want to go through that thing with a fine-tooth comb, like everything else, and what the whole idea is to make sure that all of us are getting the best bang for our buck. Probably everybody here looks at houses the same way. You know, these are investments. These are our homes, but they're also investments. We need to protect our investments. So we want to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this all turns out. Who we got next?
Good for you.
Okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about money. And the accounting and treasurer has to keep the books and keep track of everything, and everything has to follow established procedures. I mean, this is the law. I mean, everybody has to do that, or else they could be incorporated.
Closer.
Interesting thing, though, is that all checks have to have 2 signatures, and cash disbursements can't be any greater than $25.
No, you're not loud enough.
Boy, that's the first time I heard that. I'm not loud enough. Anyhow,
Miller.
in part of Article 6 again of the bylaws, subsection 3, to keep good order, condition, repair all the common areas and all items of personal property, if any, used in the enjoyment of the common area. No approval of the members is required for expenditures for these purposes except as otherwise required by declaration. In other words, if they have an emergency, they don't have to go and get a vote on it. They can have it fixed without having a general membership vote. Another one in there, which I really found interesting, is that to levy and collect the prorated annual assessments to be paid by each of the members towards the gross expenses of the corporation, and to credit any excess assessment over expenses of cash reserves to the members against the next succeeding assessment period. 2019, we were about $20,000 short on the reserve fund because we're doing roads and things like that. 2020, let me look up the number, 8,300 and $8,945 in excess funds. You know how much that comes out to? A little bit over $25 a household. What was your, did everybody else get the $2 a month increase?
Yeah.
Okay, and guess what? This year, with not spending $11,000 on the lifeguards so far, that's about $33 a household for the year. Where's this money? That money, according to the bylaws, should have been sent back to us. It's as simple as that. It's right here in black and white. It's highlighted in pink, so everybody can see it. But this, I mean, these are the type of things, this is why we're here, because of these type of things. There's absolutely no communication from the board, and where's our money going? It's as simple as that. I mean, I think we have to look at our money, and this is incumbent upon us to do it. So thank you for your time. And now anybody else who wants to speak, well, no, we got a couple other people to talk. I'm sorry. Yes, okay. So anyhow, that's it. I'm done.
Okay, you've heard the deep dives on those 3 subjects, which are really, for what we're thinking about, the most important ones. But I got one more to share with you, okay, which starts to formulate our plan going forward. And I'm going to read this to you so I get it right. So bear with me. Article 3, Section 6 of the Stonebridge Bylaws, titled Removal of Directors, subparagraph I, states the following. I is by the members.
Yes.
I is by the board. So we're going to go back to I, by the members. A director may be removed with or without cause at any regular or special meeting of the membership. Let me say that again, because this is important. A director may be removed, it's by the members, with or without cause at any regular or special meeting of the membership. Then it goes around to talk about successors and stuff like that, but then it comes back and says that we should give 10 days notice to anyone that's being thought to be taken off the board, which we have done by certified letter. And it also says that we have to give them notice and purpose of the meeting. Well, they've already called a regular meeting July 15th. Thank you very much. We know the purpose. Now, governing documents are kind of like ship specifications. They tell you what you have to do, and they tell you what you can't do. Everything else you read as it's written. So when it says a director may be removed, there's no limit. It doesn't say you can remove 1, you can remove 3, you can remove 5. There's no limit. It's up to who? The members. Okay? Also, when it says members, it doesn't say how many. There's no 2/3, there's no 75%, there's no 25 people named Bob, nothing. So any reasonable person would come to the conclusion that members to remove the board equates to a simple majority or a consensus. Okay, we've got 350 houses in here. So a simple majority is 175 plus 1. That's 176. Now if you want to be really technical and use a percentage, that bumps it up to 178. We currently have 233 signatures on the referendum. That's 67%. And I haven't done arithmetic for a while since I retired. But 67 seems to be a lot closer to 70 than it is to 50. That is a compelling number. And anybody that doesn't get that 70% of the community doesn't want you anymore is really beyond my comprehension. So let's talk about what we're going to do. Specifically, what we're proposing to the membership is that we remove the board in its entirety on July 15th, after they provide the proposed 2022 budget. On July 16th, members of the transition team are seeking to meet with Keith Sines of PMP, he's Richard Sutzman's supervisor, and a new property manager. We have corresponded by mail and by email asking for the time and place of the meeting on the 16th. And what we're going to do at that meeting is work with PMP to orchestrate a fair, honest,
Transparent,
thank you. I'm playing Walt. Election of new board members, okay? Now, that's just an event. So what's the new path forward? Let me ask you, how many of you out here, show of hands, how many of you out here are familiar with E.M. Escher, the Dutch artist? Good, good, good. Escher creates dimensional drawings where when you first look at it, you see trees. But the more you look at it, you see horses. Because the background comes to the foreground, and the foreground fades to the background. That's what part of what our new path forward is. But we need to do more than a simple Escher shift, moving the homeowners to the forefront and the board to the back part. Okay. What we need to do is create a new construct that both blends and harmonizes the community, where the board and the homeowners are working together. Now, to do that, it's going to take some work, okay? And it's going to take some behavior changes. The first thing we have to do, and there's a number of folks that have mentioned this already, is we've really got to ramp up communication. And that's on both sides. We've got to have communication that is honest, transparent, and frequent. We also need to work on that construct so that we are working for the betterment of the community, which is what we're supposed to be paying our assessments to do. So that is our proposal for how we start creating a new construct and creating a better way that we manage our community. Okay? So on the 16th, if you can, be there in presence or virtually or in spirit or in proxy. If you're not on one of the referendum sheets, sign it, and that will be there for your proxy.
At
Okay?
PMP?
And then,
If they want to be on the board? At
Where's the
PMP?
meeting?
we don't know yet.
They haven't talked to us yet.
Yeah, they haven't told us where it's going to be. They just announced that it's going to be on the 16th. Becky reminded me we also have sheets. If anybody's interested in running for the board or committee or getting more involved, we've got a sign-up sheet for that too. So sign the referendum if you haven't. Sign the volunteer sheet. Get involved. It's going to take all of us leaning in to make this work. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we hand over the mic, I'm going to try and get through this. I want to take the time to recognize Dean Cook
Yes.
for everything he's done for so long in the community. That list is long, and most of the time, nobody asked Dean to do it, and he
right.
didn't expect anything in return. And when he got dished, when he got disrespected, when he got pushed to the side, all hell started breaking loose. And that's why we're here. So if you have something to say, please make a line up over here so we can be efficient. Some of our volunteers are going to be asking if people have the same question. We're going to try to answer it once. If you can't get up and stand in line, then we'll bring the mic to you the best we can. And now it's yours. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Alexander White, and that's my wife Lisa, way in the back. And I just want to first thank her for organizing Food Truck Fridays, which has been one of the most tremendous community events that I can remember since we moved here in 2009. I live right there. And I just wanted to say, many of you may have been here tonight because of a neighbor told you about it, or you saw it advertised on Facebook, or a sheet of paper. But is there anybody that is here, and it's okay if there's not, but is there anybody here because you saw it on the community signs at the top of Hogan Hill or at the pool entrance? Many of you, at least a dozen. Okay, well, I'm in charge of the signs. After Dean no longer did that, and you did a wonderful job, by the way, Mr. Cook, I
Yes.
took that responsibility over to keep you informed about things like this. And I just wanted to let you know that on Friday afternoon, and I'm really not casting shade on anybody. I know we want to keep this very positive, but I think you ought to know that on Friday afternoon at about 4:30 p.m. I was sent an email by Mr. Sussman telling me that message inviting you here today was to be removed by noon yesterday. Because it was not an approved message by the board of directors. And so I promptly ignored the email. And the message stays. And with your permission and with the transition team's permission, I would like to continue to be on the communication team in
Yes.
charge of managing the signs with whatever we see fit, not
Thank
what the
you.
select few approve that we can do. So
Yes.
thank you for being here. God bless you.
Walt. Okay, my name's Walt Johnson. Some of you know me, some don't. I used to be president of this homeowners association, same as Jim. Different times, I'm way back when. So I know some things about how boards should be run, and the one board we have now is not being run appropriately. You already know that. I don't need to go into that. My point of saying it is that one of the things that I want to emphasize, it's already been emphasized, but I want to add to it, is communication completely. None of this, you only get to hear part of the story. That pushes my button. Another one is that I wanted to mention, this is a different subject, but Jim said to wait till later. One of the problems we have is being blamed on slash the board, PMP, whatever. Ultimately, the board is responsible, period. However, the business about, I live on Muddler, repaving my street a couple of weeks ago was done, even though it says in the Miller-Dodson, 10-year, 5-year program, whatever it is, it's actually a 30-year program, but we renew it every 5 years, 3 to 5 years. It said that my street has 10 more years of life. What I wanted to say was I don't know how to lead into this, I'll just jump in. The Miller-Dodson report is screwed up. I personally was doing what they did before Miller-Dodson was called in, because it was called a conflict of interest to have a community member doing the budget things for the future, the reserve funds and things like that. So the problem that we had right when Miller-Dodson came in, they had the wrong numbers for things that we needed to be done in the community. The wrong, not necessarily the wrong prices. They had the wrong numbers for how old the streets are going to last, or the whatever's going to last. They pulled numbers from national averages, which are not appropriate necessarily to us. And Miller-Dodson was very cooperative at the time, and he said, "Give me better numbers, we'll do it." So they admitted that they were just pulling out numbers out of the air, basically. We need to go back and take another look at that, and see if the numbers they have are appropriate. Now, that's second. Number first is to get somebody other than Miller-Dodson. I don't like the way they're doing things, and I think we can do better. Now, maybe there's nobody else out there. I don't know. I haven't looked. But Miller-Dodson's the one that said my street is good for 10 years. And the truth is, I don't think it is good for another 10 years, but it didn't need doing right now. In any event, there are other things that we need to look at that are kind of stuffed in the corner, that if somebody doesn't bring it to your attention, you don't even know is there. Like, how many people here even know who Miller-Dodson is? Anybody?
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. Okay. They are the company that does the planning for companies like Stonebridge for future expenditures. How much money you need to put away this year for something that's going to need to be done in 5 years, some of the things done in 10 years, some in 20, things like that. Now, one of the issues that I think has been mismanaged by our board, since the board's the one that's ultimately responsible, is our pool. If we really do have a problem with the pool, how come that money isn't sitting there to be, or maybe it is and I don't know it because of lack of communication, to fix the pool? And it's lots of little nitpickies like that I'm going to stop here now. But I've built up over the years a pile of irritations, if you will. But the number one is communication. The idea that the board meetings are not personal, if I can use the term, that pisses me off. We're here personal. Why can't we have a board meeting
Exactly.
personal? It's probably just, to save their own skins or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Whatever it is, I don't like it. I think that it's much better to have one-on-one conversations than when I try to phone in on the virtual or Zoom, whatever it is, board meetings.
So they
I
can
can't
mute
get
us.
in. Not because they cut me off. It's somehow or other, I can watch them and I can hear them, but when I go and talk, there's a delay of like 30 seconds. And I don't know what that's caused by, but it's a fact of life.
No, they
Maybe
just
it's my
mute
own
you.
microphone on my computer. You know, I don't know whose fault it is, but the bottom line is I don't get to put my 2 cents in. If we were there like right now, you can put your 2 cents in because I'm doing it.
Right.
So anyhow, I'm just very disappointed in how the board has behaved. But I'm not going to enumerate things, folders and all these. That's a detail. But how the board has handled things, I just think is a really bad situation. And I know you all do, and I'm battling. But I'm overjoyed at the opportunity that you guys have afforded us here. Is that better? Yes, I'm listening. Go ahead. Absolutely. I'm sorry, say again?
Come up. Ma'am, would you like to come up here and get the mic? Then we can hear you. Come on up. Anybody wants to speak? Come on up here. Don't
It's
be
about
bashful.
capital reserve fund.
Here, are you?
Do you think one is necessary?
Absolutely. The capital reserve fund is necessary. By law. Required by law. But it's a good idea also. Go ahead, what? How do you maintain what? The money? It's money that's invested in CDs and things like that in banks. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. The money is taken
From our monthly dues.
That's right. So the monthly dues, in order to have a capital reserve fund, the monthly assessments have to be increased to match the capital reserve study.
All right, you want to introduce yourself, Phyllis?
Are you in agreement? Are you in agreement?
100%. Phyllis and I were on the board together back when. So needless to say, we kind of sing off the same page.
I'm a little concerned about the dues increase if that's what she's suggesting.
It's got to be, we don't get to pick what it costs to keep up the neighborhood.
But in, what was it?
We are
Mike?
required to maintain the roads, for example. That's the biggest single item.
But the roads were not included on last budget. It was zero for repair roads.
Okay, let me clear the air a little bit here, okay? First of all, a reserve study is required by law. And that came into effect because years ago across the country, condominium associations were going bankrupt because they didn't have enough in their reserves to replace a $450,000 roof, okay? So every state, just about, I think every state, has a law that says you have to have a reserve study. There's 3 kinds of reserve studies. There's one that's actuarial, where they look across the country and they take all the averages and they say this should have a life of X number of years. And then they put it into a graph that says when you get to that year, with all these things, you need this much money, okay? The second level of reserve studies, they come in and actually inspect what you have and then apply their mathematics to it. The third, the most expensive, but also the most comprehensive, is they send in a team of professional engineers that crawl up in the attic of the pool room. They look at the pipes, they look at everything. All of those end up with a curve that says for the next 30 years, here's how much money you're going to spend year by year, and at the rate that you're going, here's how much money you're going to have to spend on those things. There's likely less than 10% of homeowner, property owner associations that are 100% funded. Most of them run on 80 to 85%, and if something catastrophic happens, they do a special assessment. But usually what you find is, yeah, you're supposed to replace the roof on the pool house, and they put in $28,000, and we find a way to do it for $25,000. Now we got $3,000. So to say that it's guaranteed we're going to have assessment increases every year over year to keep up with the reserve funds is a little bit skewed to the other side. Okay. So who's next?
As a footnote to what Jim just said is, I also happen to own a condo in Honolulu. That has a board there, which is being disassembled by people who are resigning because they're mismanaging things. Money was not put in a reserve fund to take care of the water pipes in the building, and every unit, it's a $12.5 million job, and every unit, mine being one of them, is being charged roughly, I haven't come up with the exact number, but it's about $45,000 I need to come up with in the next few months because the reserve fund didn't cover it. I want us here not to be in that position.
Isn't there an automatic $2 increase in January for all of us in the home?
I know nothing about that.
It was $56 a month, and then it was increased to $58 a month.
And it's going to be 60 January.
But then weren't we supposed to be getting money back
I don't know.
because of reimbursements, because of the
No
pool?
idea.
Who was the?
We haven't seen the 2022 budget proposal, so we don't know if there's assessment increase in there or not. We also don't know that if these folks really understand that they're supposed to give money back to us when they have a surplus. But they will pretty doggone soon.
And then why can't that money be used for?
One clarification on that, Jim. If we are only, we don't know this at this point, if we are only, let's call it 70% funded in the reserve account, that money can go to move it up to 73% or whatever without giving it back. Now, we have to find out the legality of doing that, but that's one of the things that needs to be considered.
Doesn't the state limit how much you can charge in association fees?
No.
I thought they did when I first moved there.
But I think it should be the association deciding that, not the board.
Okay, we got somebody else here in line, and he's not afraid to speak up neither.
Apparently not. But I'm not on the board, have never been on the board. But my wife and I'm Jim Price, my wife is Kathy. We moved here in 1998, so roughly 23 years now. When we first came here, there was no property management group. There was no pool management company. The board and the association ran the association. We controlled everything. We had reserves, we had plans, we had, at that time, unfortunately, the developer owned 51% of the development, so he was the gorilla, he had control, if you will. They developed and wrote most of the bylaws because it was in their interest to preserve their development that they were creating. All right, once the ownership tipped to the point where there weren't, the developer didn't have 51%, then that's when the actual owners of the buildings that they were buying, us, took ownership of the development. The point is, we managed pretty well without either the first Cladgett group or the PMP group, and we also managed pretty well without a pool management company. Those are our two largest expenses. They annually consume most of our budget. So we're talking about $2 here, $2 there. We're talking about reserve money, and the money that was spent over the last 20 years on these management companies, maybe they benefited us, maybe they didn't, but that's money that's not in our reserve today. That's money that's just gone. And I think what's going on here is the best thing, in that we're evaluating, okay, first of all, is the board doing their job? Secondly, do we really need to pay money for management companies? We have clearly very talented people within our community here that have skills, have knowledge, have abilities. Is there any reason they couldn't be paid a stipend and be far less than a management company? Because obviously it's a lot of work for individuals to take on by themselves on a volunteer basis. So just throwing out some options, some ideas, and thank you all for putting this together.
Can I respond a little bit?
Yes.
I agree.
In just a second, I want to add a couple of things. First of all, if you go back and you look, and Mike McCarthy's got, I think, the paperwork with him, the 2020 budget included $158,000 from the reserve funds to pave streets. The 2020 budget included money to pave the streets. That money was not spent, at least on streets. So the reserve should be pretty healthy relative to where we're supposed to be. The second thing that I wanted to respond back is there are places that do self-manage. It can be done. If you have people in the community that will take on hiring a lawyer when you need one, hiring an accountant when you need one, hiring contractors when you need them, going into contracts, that can be done. However, we have to change our governing documents first, because as the gentleman pointed out, they were written 20 years ago for the betterment of the investors and the builders, okay? We need to revise them to today. And that, my friends, does require 75% of the association to sign. So that's where we stand there. I would love to be self-managed.
For you that know me, I'm Rob Claxton. I'm not very public the last 10 years or so bear with me. But two things I wanted to bring up was the documents predate Dan Ryan. This community was actually developed, I believe, by Lacey Rice and his family. And I don't know if you know who Lacey Rice is, but he was a banker, lawyer, developer back out of D.C. who I had dealings with out of Bethesda, and then he did a bunch of land developments around here. Those documents are very difficult to reverse, if not impossible. If you read them, you've got to give notice, and then you have to predate them 3 years into the future. So be very careful about thinking about we can change covenants without really a 13-year process occurring. Because he was very clever on how he wrote his documents. The other thing is, in regards to the reserve study, I've been a member of professional condos associations that self-managed and didn't put aside the reserves because they wanted to pocket the money for their businesses. What happens when you don't fund your reserves and you go to sell your property under the new laws is your appraised value gets decreased by any reserve amount. So if we have any washout areas along the edge of the community, or we have a road, like when we come in here, if an FHA inspector comes in and sees that, he's going to say, give me an assessment that you don't have a sinkhole. Okay? And a sinkhole assessment is going to cost you, I don't know, Walt, what's your best guess on $13,000?
A bunch.
Yeah, and that's if you can get just one engineer in, okay? Right now, there's an association I deal with where we got a dam that they didn't have the original records on, and the soil samples didn't work. Fortunately, these dams are not ours, correct. And that's one thing I checked when I bought into the community, is we don't own these dams. But you'll notice they get maintained every year, so they can pass an inspection in West Virginia. So be very careful about our reserve funds. Without those reserve funds, there's no guarantee you can sell your house 10 years, 20 years from now. And with what's happening with legislation federally and with the National Institute of Standards, which can move without any legislation, they can specify what the minimum standards are for us overnight, or without, actually with 90-day emergency ruling, without us having any say whatsoever. So the concept of underfunding or getting a credit back on the reserves or what's left over, be very careful about, because that determines whether you can sell your house in the future. And if you want it under a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or FHA loan, or a VA loan even, it can get very strict where you can't sell your house. And there were communities in Prince George's County when the great financial crisis hit, where their homeowner associations were so underfunded that people were unable to sell their houses.
Lender wouldn't loan the money.
Correct. Yeah, you can sell your house for cash, but you can't get a loan. No one can get a loan on that property. And that's one of the biggest failures with homeowner associations, is they don't have the reserves to fix whatever the problem is. And that could be like the pool leak. That could be a $5,000 problem. That could be an $85,000 problem. So just remember that the predictability of what we don't know can cost us a lot of money, which we've just seen in 2020. Okay, so that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting me, my name is Ron Weinrich. I live up at the other end of Caledonia. If you're wondering who the nut job is that puts those 85 luminaries along the driveway, guilty as charged. I built that house 21 years ago with the idea that I was going to retire on a golf course and spend my life just puttering around in the backyard. Obviously that rug was pulled out from under me some years ago. However, I'm happy to announce that this past Friday, day before yesterday, papers were signed turning over the property, the golf course, to a new owner. This new owner is a local person. He's a businessman. He's lived here all his life. His name is Jimmy Van Meter. I always lose that one. In talking with him, his preliminary plans at this point, first of all, he wants to get the clubhouse up and running. He and his wife are in the restaurant business big time. For instance, the Palace Lounge over in Edwin Miller, they own that one, and a few others around town. My only question is, why didn't he buy this place 5 years ago? Anyway, with that, he's going to start on the back nine here, our side. Now, you've all seen Keith out here cutting the greens and some of the fairways and so forth. I understand that that's not the case on the other side. I've heard from him that some of the greens have trees growing up through them. They couldn't find some of the cart paths. They were so overgrown. So there's a lot of work to be done. However, he has hired a professional already that will start work on getting the fairways and greens up while Jimmy is working on the clubhouse. So don't get your clubs out to expect to tee off tomorrow. We hope that it's going to happen next year. Yep.
I have a question. Is he going